Hi, and welcome to African Roots. My name is Jepmena Molel, and this is another day of me rediscovering my African roots. So, today we are talking about something or someone don't think we had enough of in our books, in our history books. His name is Koitalel Arap Samoei. I think in a past video I have touched on it. But this one is more an in-depth story about who he is and how he came to be. So by the end of this video, I think you'll understand why the British were so scared of this one man, and it took them over a decade of actual war, by the way. So instead, they decided to use trickery, as would be for most wars anyway. Okay, so let me back up a little. So before Kenya even really became Kenya as we know it today, the way we think of it, without those borders and all that, the highlands out of the Rift Valley belonged majorly to the Nandi people then, right? The Nandi is part of the larger Kalenjin community. You can go back to one of my first videos where I talked about the different sub-tribes of the Kalenjin people. So one thing I've learned about them so far is that even before the British showed up, is that they were known for refusing to be pushed over, so pushed around. It's literally part of essentially the Kale male setup to not be a pushover, right? So when the British started coming inland in the 1890s and trying to expand what they called British East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, part of Tanzania, or Tanganyika, they expected to get everywhere else a little bit of what they usually get everywhere else, just a little bit of fighting, then people would give in, sign something, and that's that, right? You have the land. But that is not what actually happened with the Nandi. The Nandi fought them for 11 years. 11. Some historians actually say this is one of the longest anti-colonial resistances in East African history, which honestly I did not know much about that, and I feel like that alone should be a whole chapter somewhere, not just a footnote, but who be I? And the person who led this entire war was Koitalel Arap Samoei. Now, here's the thing about Koitalel Arap Samoei that I think is really important to know. And it's something that keeps coming up as I learn about the different Kalenjin leaders over time. He wasn't just a military guy. He was an Orkoyot, which is a title of high esteem within the Kalenjin people, right? It mostly is a role that is between a spiritual role or a spiritual leader and a political leader. So these people came from a very specific lineage. And the lineage specifically is called the Talal lineage, and it was believed that whoever held this title had this gift of prophecy. And basically that's what Koitalel was. Since he was around 25, because then we use not to necessarily measure it in years, but give or take 25 years of age, he took it after his own father, who was also an Orkoyot before him. So this was a lineage that came down or was passed down to him from his father. Actually, he started biggest prediction. He predicted his own death. And then he warned his sons about what was coming for the community. So even before these people arrived, or what they said, or how they said it, he already had warned the people. These people are coming, and I'm gonna die by their hand, and they're gonna bring the railway, they're gonna take your land, they're gonna take your people. Be cautious. So when he made this prediction, he described this thing, a long black snake moving across the land, spitting fire. And people are like, okay, what does that mean, right? And this is the years before the British ever showed up to survey anything. And then, boom, the railway comes. What does a railway look like? A long black snake that spits fire. Then it was steam engines. So, prediction. Then the British start building. That was the Ugandan railway, right through their land. And people actually started calling it the Lunatic Express. So he basically predicted the railway before a single piece of it existed. And I don't know about you, but that alone would make me listen to whatever this man said next, Unajua say. So the railway was a big deal, right? Because for the British, this isn't just a train. This is control. Whoever controls that line controls trade, controls how fast they can move their soldiers, controls access to everything inland, and is cutting right through Nandi territory. So Koitalel thinks about it and he organizes a resistance, because why not? And I want to be clear about what this actually looked like. So Nandi warriors with spears, and one big thing about the Kale people, archers. So bow and arrows were the thing then, and they were going against rifles. Yeah. And for over a decade, that is from 1895 to 1905, 10 good years, they held their ground. Yeah. And officer after officer who got sent by the British to deal with the Nandi, and it just didn't work, because it actually starts becoming like their whole embarrassing. It's becoming an embarrassing situation for these white people, because unarudi lada nambwa hukweza next. Anyway, so eventually they send in a guy who was called Richard. I'm sure I'll butcher his name. Richard Maine Hagen. Yeah. And I looked into him a little because, I wanted to understand who was this person. And, well, he came from a really rich British banking family. And he went to this fancy school. It's called Harrow. It's Harrow, actually. Harrow. Harrow. Where apparently he was even classmates with a future prime minister. So this is not just some random soldier that they picked, or a sergeant who just came up in the ranks and they decided this would be the perfect person for the role. He grew into it, and he also had backing, right? So this is someone who had connections within that army. And even he couldn't break the Nandi by force. So he decided, since force wouldn't work, betrayal felt like a better option here. Yeah? So in October of 1905, Maine Hagen sends word that the British want to talk peace. You remember peace? Let's do a peace meeting. So your boyfriend does it in the behind, but okay, in the back. Sorry, in the back. Like he tells you, let's do this slowly, but he knows what's happening in Ukraine. But anywho, a truce meeting. Both sides agree to bring only 5 companions each, and everyone's supposed to come unarmed. Sikuja na gun, sitakuja na spear yangu, I know come with my bow and arrow. We'll just talk man to man and we see how this thing goes. Now, remember how Koitalel's father also predicted things? Some people say that Koitalel himself had this feeling. So the morning of the meeting, he knew that something was off. His spirit was telling him that this man wasn't being honest with him. Anyway, he still went, because that's the kind of leader he was. He showed up, he gave his word, and he went anyway, even with that feeling in his gut. Don't know if that was wise, honestly, but he still went. So on October 19th, 1905, at a place called Ketparak. Well, direct translation of that means drive up, but today it is a club called the Nandi Bears Club. So if you can visit there, maybe you will know where where Koitalel was betrayed. So he walks up to Maynard Hagen and extends his hand to greet him. And Maynard Hagen raises also, but it's a gun, and shoots him. Dead. At point blank range. While his hand was still out. Lord, imagine what was going on through his mind. And this wasn't some fair fight that went wrong, because Maynard Hagen didn't actually bring the 5 men like they'd agreed. He had dozens more hidden in the bushes around the meeting spot. So the second Koitalel is shot, they opened fire on the rest of his unarmed delegation. Again, the faithful leader. Accounts vary a bit on what happened or the exact numbers, but a minimum, probably 2,000 people or so were killed, or the Nandi was right there. And in the chaos that followed that, that they were resisting and they had a leader, and everything collapsed without its leader. Way more people ended up dead. And it even gets worse, actually. Yeah, I know you're asking yourself how much worse could it get from here. Maynard Hagen decides, after he's already shot him dead, to decapitate his body. He takes the skull along with all, remember I told you he was an old coyote? All his sacred leadership items, his ceremonial batons, his cloak. The Calais elders have a headdress. So he also took his headdress and he brings them all to Britain as trophies of war. And here's the detail that irked me. Like, I was researching this. Maynard Hagen wrote about this himself. He was the one who put down the account. In his own diary, which he published a few years later to see how he got over this, right? He admits it outright. He wrote about how he did this, what went down, what he did after, how he set out, how many people died according to his count, because obviously we wouldn't know everybody. The funny part is, he said that this specific act haunted him for years. Which, okay, you can write that it haunted you, but you still did it. Ulifanya. And you still took his head home with you as a souvenir. And you still don't bring it back even after talking about how you... Anyway, I'm not angry. So I know how much sympathy I have for him on that aspect, or that unseen even. Maybe it was, I don't know why he wrote the book, but anyway. So now let's talk about what happened to everything that was taken, because this is honestly the part that also made me want to slightly make this video in the first place. So remember those sacred batons and other ceremonial items? Those were returned for decades. Almost a millennia. Actually, it is a millennia. Millennium, 100. I don't know. How many is 100 years? It wasn't returned for 100 years because Koitalel was killed in 1905. And his items, his ceremonial items, as well as his skull, was returned in 2006. 101 years later. Over 100 years later, there is a mausoleum and a museum now at Nandi Hills where these items have been kept. But the skull, hakuna mtu anajua kwenye iko so far. If you know, please maybe comment down below if you know where it is. I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but if you know where it is, please tell us in the comment section down below. Tell us where it is. I would love to know. Now, Koitalel's own descendants, along with the Nandi leaders, have petitioned the British government more than once. Honestly, I'm sure more than 10 times. And they've even directly asked King Charles III about it during his visit to Kenya, asking for the skull back. Because it's our people, right? Plus some form of compensation for everything that happened. As far as I'm concerned, they are still waiting. Even me, I'm still waiting. So here's why I wanted to start this series with this story specifically. Growing up, I learned so much about resistance movements, the Maji Maji, the the Mau Mau. I know all that. But nobody really sat me down and told me about Koitalel, about that there was a man, even though it was a small part of the story, that there was a man in Rift Valley who held down the entire British Empire for 11 years using spears, and who predicted the railway, that it would be built. And this, I believe, is not an oversight. How our history is written, it is to take part of our memories too. A whole chapter becomes one line in a textbook, if it's even mentioned at all, because I don't even know what is in our books anymore. And I don't think knowing this is about us staying angry or dwelling on it forever. I just think his body was taken apart, quite literally. So the least we can do all these years later is put his name back together. Say it. Know it. When someone asks you who's Koitalel Arap Samoei, you know who it is. So if this is the first time you are hearing about Koitalel Arap Samoei, let me know in the comments. I want to know how many of us are learning this together. This is today's video. Thank you so much for coming along with me. I hope you've learned something new about a man who deserves to be way more than a footnote. And I'll see you next time for our next story about our heritage. Have a great day. Bye.